Put them on. Sorry.
So Janet and Jack Teich are here tonight. Jack is going to tell a story, so we'll have him start now. And if everyone can mute themselves,
Okay.
and then at the end, if you have questions or else text, chat it to Meredith.
Okay, I'm happy to, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep, okay. I'm happy to answer, we are happy to answer any questions if questions come up. But just to give a little, first of all, I'm Jack. This is my most beautiful wife, Janet.
I pay him to say that.
And if you got the book, you will see some beautiful pictures of her when she was a young 30-year-old, newly married for how many years? 7, 8? No, we were married
I was
maybe
20
about 10 years at the time. Any rate, just to give a little background, I don't know if any of you remember the incident in 1974, but it was a tragedy, a terrible tragedy at the time. I was 34 years old. Janet was 30. We had 2 little children, one 2 years old, one our boy, a little boy, and the next boy up was 7, right?
Yes.
7 years old. Our daughter, who's our 3rd child, wasn't born yet. What made me, after all these years, decide to write this book? The tragedy itself, which we'll go into, was terrible, obviously, to the point where, believe it or not, we as a family never really ever discussed it. It was similar to people that come out of the Holocaust that just never wanted to talk. They don't want to think about it, and they don't want to talk about it, and they never discussed it with their children, and life went on. Well, that's pretty much what it was with us. We never really discussed it, although we lived through it, obviously. We did not discuss it with our children. When they got older, very limited. And we didn't discuss it with our friends. But one day, about 2.5, 3 years ago, I said, I need to document as much as I need to document everything. One, for my children who don't know the whole story, my grandchildren who know zero about it, and also for friends of that had questions throughout the years, but they didn't have any answers. They were reluctant to even ask. And if they did ask, they really didn't get an answer, qualified answer. So that's what motivated me to do it. And fortunately, I had, for whatever reason, I can't even explain, but I saved all the documents from the trial, which, by the way, was the longest trial in Nassau County history, 17-week trial, from the investigation, which went on for 4 years. It was a 4-year investigation. And I really had most of the as much documents as one could have. And I never threw them out. I just had boxes full of this stuff. So I pulled out the boxes, newspapers, the pictures, the FBI reports. And by the way, the police are, and just a comment, and we'll get into the story. I know there's been bad publicity, which actually upsets me. Most recently about the police and the FBI, but I could tell you, we lived through it. They were the most professional, intelligent, compassionate group of people that we have ever had the honor to know. I acknowledge it in the book, and I'm just telling you, and it just upsets me when I see what's happening. With these people devote their lives to that profession, and they're good, very good.
And we're still friends with them.
And we're still friends with many of them. The prosecutor in the case was a young assistant district attorney who did a fabulous job, who later became a Supreme Court judge, currently retired now. Anyway, that's just a little bit of background. Let me get into the, and by the way, has anybody read the book? Yeah, well, I know you did.
Nancy.
Okay. Anyway.
Yes, it was fabulous.
Yeah. On a November night in 1974, I worked in Brooklyn. My office, by the way, my office is still in Brooklyn, in the same place. A little bit of a different business, but that's where I don't work full time anymore. But I still commute to Brooklyn. We live primarily in Westchester County now. At that time, we lived in Great Neck. We lived in Kings Point. We moved from there about 30 some odd years ago to Westchester County, which we live now. I was driving home. It was a rainy night. It was the week before Thanksgiving. There was leaves, from the fall foliage still on the ground, and a rain. And we lived on not only did we live on a dead end street, but we lived on Kings Point is a peninsula, and there's only really two roads in, and there's no, and it's also those two roads are also a dead end. So the people that, if you see any cars driving along, they live there. Because there's no through. There's just no through traffic because you can't get anywhere from it. So I'm driving home on a weekday evening after work, and my routine was pretty similar. I put in a long day. I left my house maybe 7 in the morning, and I came home, give or take, 7 at night, including the commuting. I'm driving home, and I stop at there's a couple of stop signs once you get into the Kings Point area, and the car pulls up right behind me, and the lights shining. I said, "Boy, this is a little unusual." I stopped at the stop sign, and I said, "Well," I said, "he must live here." I said to myself, I said, "Well, he must live here as I do." I didn't think much of it. I drove on, pulled maybe a quarter of a mile down, pulled into my driveway. And the driveway pulled up to my garage. The garage was separated from the house with a 20-foot breezeway. I pull up to the garage door. The garage doors were closed. They were painted white. I never parked in the garage. I parked outside of the garage. I turned my lights off. Normally, it was dark. Should have been dark. When I turned my lights off, I looked and the garage doors were bright as they were light shining on. I said, "What?" I fiddled with the lights again. My lights were off. Well, I look in the rearview mirror. There's a car behind me, right with this light shining up. I get out of the car.
Hello.
Just mute yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Janice. We'll try to get back
He's talking.
to Jack. Hold on, we don't.
Yeah.
Lost your sound.
I can't hear him.
All right, here we go.
And
Hold
hear
on,
you.
we're trying to-
Wait, we're trying to get it
Wait.
back.
Janice, did you hit anything like share when you came in?
No.
Jack, we're trying to get you back to the screen. Hold on.
Can you call Jack on his cell phone?
He's muted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all.
Oh,
Okay,
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
you have to back
Where
up
did I
a little.
leave- where did I
The
leave
light
off?
shining in the driveway.
In the drive, okay. Anyway, the lights, so they took the two individuals. The passenger was the only one that spoke, basically put a gun to my head and said, you're coming with us in the car, or we're gonna blow your head off.
Ay, ay, ay.
At that moment, I thought to myself, what do you call it? My house backed some woods, and I said to myself, and it was dark. It was even with the lights on, it was still dark. It was raining. I said, I could make a run for it, and they'd never get me because they don't know the woods, and I know the woods. My kids knew the woods. And then I said, in that flash second, 10 seconds maybe, I said, then am I leaving my house unprotected? Would they think of going into my house, Janet, with my two little kids? That flashed through my brain. So I said, well, I'm not going to do it. And I didn't do it. I could have done it. Any rate, I got into their, they had a small Ford Mustang. They walked me over to the car, pushed me into the back seat of the car, handcuffed my hands, put putty on my eyes, and then a blindfold around my head, so I couldn't see anything, and tape, duct tape. I couldn't talk, couldn't see, and I obviously couldn't move. So that was the beginning of a week of hell. And now what I'm gonna do is stop for a couple of minutes, and I'm gonna let Janet, who was inside the house waiting for me for dinner, what did she go through in that time? And then I'll come back to more of the
Actually,
story.
I was going out to the movies with a friend. Ironically, the movie was called Gone with the Wind. And I was surprised he wasn't in the house yet. And I hadn't seen his car, so I took the boys upstairs and put them to bed. When I came down, I noticed his car. But he wasn't in the house. I went outside to see, where he was, and I couldn't find him. And so I called the police, Kings Point police, because we lived in Kings Point. They came over, and I called my friend and told her, well, I can't go to the movies because my husband's not there. She came over with her husband, and they watched the police walk around the house, outside the house, and my friend's husband said, they're laughing at you. They don't believe that he, they think he went someplace. And they ended up, they left. And the next morning, he didn't come back, of course. And the next morning, I remember the childhood friend of his. I did call his brother, and his brother came over, and my sister-in-law, and the next day I called the police. I remember that his childhood friend would believe, what happened.
He was an assistant district
He was
attorney.
assistant district attorney at the time. So, and he called up the Nassau County Police, and he said to me, well, I believe you. And the police came over right away, and they set up a tape recorder in the kitchen. And so that when I got the first phone call, it got recorded. So, which made it,
Okay.
where the kidnapper said that they had Jack.
There were incidentally, here's Janet's picture from the book at 30 years old. Is it coming on? That was an FBI picture.
Yeah, well, I have to just tell you about that picture. He loves that picture. But
Yeah.
I hate the picture because they took that picture before we went for the payoff. And I was convinced that would be the picture plastered in the newspapers after I had been killed. So I was not feeling like I should smile and taking my picture. I was terrified.
Just to expand a little bit, the king, and I'm going to make a general statement. These small little police departments are not very professional, and they're not worth having. Why communities like ours have a 15-man department or a 10-man department or a 20-man department? Who knows? But
let me just interject one thing. About, since you're talking about the police. The next morning, they were not going to do anything until I went to the bank to see if he withdrew money from the bank, because they were convinced that he ran off my neighbor, because they were going to talk to her, and I said, well, no, she went away. So they were convinced that they ran away together. So I went to the local bank. We really had a small account there. And, the police found out that they didn't make any withdrawals, so they believed me a little bit more.
Look, the real activity started was when when the county police came in, and they came in and as soon as they came in, and as soon as they came into the case, which was, by the way, not until the next day, the following a day later, it was the next, during the when Janet called this family friend of ours, and he picked up a phone and called the chief of detectives, a fellow by the name of Ed Curran, and said, I've known Jack since he's 4 years old, and this is totally out of character. And that's when the wheels started turning. And fortunately, there were 3 ransom calls that came to the house, and the police, and then they called the FBI in, of course, too. The police had captured those 3 calls, and those 3 calls, this was a circumstantial case, because I never really saw these people. They had ski masks on. I mean, I could see they were black because I could see their hands, but I couldn't identify them. They had ski masks. So it was a very circumstantial case. So that type of evidence, the voice, the the wording of what went into the phone calls, which were horrible, terrible. They were just terrible phone calls. You could imagine and they're all in the book, by the way, word for word. But so when they came in, they moved 2 Nassau County detectives, 2 FBI agents, a female and a male, and a male, detective sergeant, moved in and slept at the house for a week. They were there 24/7.
But they went and sleep in
In the-
beds, on the couch or wherever.
In that they were in the house too, and then they were all around the neighborhood and all around the place. But the in the meantime, I was in most probably the Bronx in a cold water flat apartment at least half the time in a 2-foot by 5-foot closet. When they drove me, when I was in the back of this Mustang, and I took mental notes of how long the drive was. We went over a bridge, either the Whitestone or the Throgs Neck Bridge at the time. It was a 50-cent toll. 2 coins went into one of in the coin machines. And it was probably a 45-minute drive. They then took me to out of the car, still handcuffed, blindfolded, up into an apartment in a closet. In the closet, they were fully prepared, by the way. I mean, they were fully prepared for this thing. In the closet there were chains on both walls, of which they had these like a loop in the wall, and then a chain coming around. One went around my neck with a padlock, and one around my feet, with just enough slack to be able to kneel. If I had to kneel, I couldn't stand up, but I could kneel. I was there probably for 4 of the 7 days, and then the last of the 3 days, there was a bed in the room, and they took me out of the closet and put me in the bed, and chained me to the bed. So, but I was still in the room and blindfolded and all of that. What you would see in a typical, what you would think you would see in a kidnapping in a movie or a book. And by the way, kidnapping is a very rare crime. It's not, especially in the United States. It's not a prevalent crime. Books have not been written on kidnappings as much as their books been written on all the other crimes. So there's no real protocol. And the FBI told me this. We don't have a protocol because everyone is different. Every kidnapping is different. Our primary goal is to save the victim. You know, I mean, the victim come out of this thing alive. Most times they don't, but our primary goal. So what you would think, the week went by. They made me make I don't know, 2 or 3 tape what do you call it, tape recordings, pictures holding up a New York Post to show that the date that I was still alive on a certain date with, you know, the front page of a New York Post. And they were back and forth, which of course I didn't know. They never mentioned, they didn't discuss anything with me. They didn't tell me anything while I was there, not a thing. All they did was grill me about my family, my father, my mother passed away a number of years before. My brothers,
Moline.
yeah, all of the family and the what do you call it? The company and all the, you know, anything where they could get information as to how they could get the most money possible. Basically, that was what they did. These were a very, very bad group of people. They were also very, very intelligent. These were not street thugs. These were not, these were very smart people that had this very well planned. This is the era, if you all remember, of the late 60s through the middle 70s. When it was, what do you call it? The Patty Hearst, the Patty Hearst era, the John Paul Getty. Patty Hearst was 6 months before me, or it was, I'm sorry, 6 months after me, and Paul Getty was 6 months before me. But the Patty Hearst era was the Symbionese Liberation Army, the Black Panthers, the Black Liberation Army. They were, there was a tremendous amount of militancy in that era. And these people were products of that era. One of them worked for me, not the lead guy. The lead guy was a childhood friend. They came out of Brooklyn. They went to whatever that privileged school is, like Stuyvesant High School, whatever the privileged school was in Brooklyn at the time. I can't think of the name. They were both Korean War vets. The one that worked for me was a paratrooper, family man, lived in Co-op City. He had 4 children. The lead man was his childhood friend, as I mentioned. Very smart guy. Was a very successful real estate broker in California. He flew a private plane. He was a pilot. He, what do you call it? Left the country for a while to start a little charter airline business. he actually taught college in California for a while. So these were bright people. Of the there was only one. Yeah, there was only one that was tried and convicted and sentenced to 25 years to life. By the way, 25 years to life in New York State means you don't get out of 25 years. Means you're in for a lot longer than 25 years when the sentence is 25 to life. His name was Richard Warren Williams. He was the childhood friend of a fellow by the name of Charles Anthony Berkeley, who worked for me for 15 years, worked in our engineering department. He had left the company about 2 years before this incident. He was, which we found out later, these were very radicalized individuals. They were involved in these organizations. They wrote poems and all sorts of what do you call it? I can't think of the word, but they lived this radicalized lifestyle. When the police and the FBI, and by the way, let me just backtrack. I was not the original target. Janet just reminded me. My older brother, who was 12 years older, was the original target. And they had tried to get him on at least 2 different occasions, at least 2 that we know of. But we couldn't he couldn't figure out what was going on, and they didn't get him, but they tried to get him. And one of them was they lured him to Westchester County Airport on a Sunday, some rouse, and he said something doesn't sound right, and he came to the airport with his wife, not to the main terminal. It was a private area. My son at 6 years old, who was sleeping in his house for that weekend, and he had his wife and he had a big dog at the time. So all 4 of them were there, and they didn't grab him. But that was one of the incidents. Another one, they tried to lure him at night somewhere else that we know of. Anyway, they couldn't get him. So they went after me. But Charles Berkeley, just to show you the militancy of these people, they after the interviews, they interviewed the police and FBI. They worked one-on-one, one Nassau County detective, one FBI agent. They sent them out in teams, and they interviewed obviously most of, if not all the people that worked for us, but all the people that had worked for us for the prior 5 years that left the company. They tracked most of them down and they interviewed them. One was a fellow by the name of Charles Berkeley. He had left the company 2 years before. He was working in the Bronx at a competitor of ours. And they went to him once and he, what do you call it? They didn't like some of the answers to his questions they asked. So they went back a second time and said, Charlie, we'd like to talk to you again. Oh, yeah, sure, come over. And they talked to him again. And they went back and they said, there's just something, he's not telling us or not answering. Let's call him in for a third interview. Well, they called him in. They said, Charlie, we'd like to talk to you again. There are some issues we need to be cleared up. Well, guess what? He took off. He took off for 4 years. 4 years. And he, in that 4-year time, he left his 4 children, his wife. They lived in Co-op City, I mentioned. And he returned on his own after 4 years. He got a hold of a reporter that walked him into FBI headquarters, and he gave himself up. Well, he was under indictment at the time. And his childhood friend was already tried and sentenced and was already in Greenhaven State Prison for 25 years to life. Well, they called Charlie Berkeley in, the assistant district attorney who tried the case, a fellow by the name of Ed McCarty, and they called him into the attorney's district attorney's office, and they said, Charlie, we are prepared to give you full immunity. I didn't know any of this, obviously, till way later. We're prepared to give you full immunity. Tell us everything. Who's involved? What's involved? Who else? He came in with an attorney. And guess what Charlie Berkeley did? He was offered full immunity. Got up and said, I don't know what you're talking about, and walked out of the meeting. So this is and the one that was sitting in prison 25 years to life, he was offered reduced sentence. He wouldn't give anybody up and he wouldn't talk. As it turned out, Berkeley's indictment was overturned on a technicality, and he got off scot-free and was never tried, and he never went to jail. Let's see, where am I at? Oh, the kidnappers that were very, very concerned. They listened to the radio 24/7 in the other room. I heard the radio, it was on all the time. They were listening, and the police had, in other words, the county police, the reporter for Newsday at the time, and then all the news, they shared all the stories, had the story right the first day. And the deputy, the commissioner and the chief of detectives asked the newspapers, please don't print anything about this kidnapping, which we want to get the victim back. And they actually honored the request from the police. They had the story. They didn't print it. And one has to wonder if they would do that today. They did it then. And there's no question in my mind, I can tell you now, there's no question in my mind that saved my life. Had this been all over the newspapers, I wouldn't be around. I'm totally convinced of that. So the media actually did the right thing. And I met that reporter that shortly after I came back, they introduced me to him. Anyway, so the other two people that the police are convinced were involved in the case, that they did not have enough evidence to indict. there were four involved. Was a relative of this fellow Williams, Richard. He had about 10 alias names, by the way. Number of wives. I mean, well, it was either his relative or one of his wife's relative was a fellow by the name of John Ford. John Ford lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and John Ford was a college professor, believe it or not. He was the third one. He was, no question, he was involved. No question, he was up in New York at the time. The fourth one that they believe was involved was a fellow by the name of forget his first name. Last name was Singleton. He was a New York City cop who got out on after 10 or 12 years on a disability, and was black. They were all black, and they just didn't have enough evidence. So that was the group, and the point I'm trying to bring out is they were not street thugs in any way, shape, or form. They were very smart, intelligent, very radicalized at the time, blatantly anti-Semitic, I may add. You'll read that in the book if you ever read the book. They were seriously anti-Semitic. Anyway, that's a short overview. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Let me just, before we get into that, they asked for an unrealistic, untenable amount of money at the time, $750,000. My brother, who was the liaison, more or less, between between my wife, the police, asked the professionals. They said, should we negotiate this with them? And the professional, the police, FBI, I came back and said, after reading all the garbage they sent in and analyzing the case, they said, look, we can't tell you what to do, but if you can pay it, pay it. We don't, obviously, if you can't pay it, you negotiate whatever you can pay. But our purpose is to get your brother back. So if you can pay that, pay it, and hopefully we'll get it back for you. Well, they didn't get it back. They only got back $38,000 of the amount of money. But that was their professional advice. I wanted to get that point across. Yeah, the payoff, which was in Penn Station, it would be what you would read what you would think you would read in a book of going from one phone on the street to another phone to track 17 to Nedick's. Remember Nedick's? There's a phone booth outside of Nedick's. Well, that's exactly what happened. They drove in from Long Island with all this money, a caravan of cars. They went to a phone booth they were told to go to a phone booth. My brother and Janet. And by the way, the female FBI agent that was living at our house was about Janet's age at the time, and she was a young
No,
agent.
she's about 4 years old.
Yeah, 4 years older.
Yeah.
Okay, give it in her 30s though. She was in her
Right.
30s too. If Janet wasn't able psychologically to make the payoff, she was going to go with my brother and make the payoff. But
But she was almost 2 heads taller than me,
she was.
and I didn't know if they knew what it looked like.
Yeah.
So how could I take the chance
Yeah.
of letting her, her take, my place, and then if he doesn't come back, I'm no good for my boys, because, I'd have too much guilt about it.
Yeah.
And then aside from the fact that I'd be too upset about him not coming back. So, I couldn't take that chance.
So that just to interject, that female that female agent, her name was Margot Dennedy. Margot Dennedy is still a close friend of the family. She retired from the bureau and went to work for Sotheby's, the big auction company, and she was in charge of worldwide security. Went all over the world for Sotheby's, and she's fully retired now. She lives in Manhattan. She lives in Peter Cooper Village in Manhattan. Never got married. Anyway, there were. I want to leave time for questions, but I'll just go to the payoff. The payoff was what I said before. It's something if you would think of a kidnapping, that's what it was.
I have to interject
What?
something. Talking about the payoff, they said there couldn't be new bills, and they couldn't be same serial numbers. So Jack's brother Buddy came up with the idea that even though we were going to use new money that we got from the bank, the way money becomes old is by use. So all the FBI agents and the detectives went around a table. They picked up money, they crumbled it up so it looked like it was used, and then they went around the table so the serial numbers wouldn't be consecutive. And so the kidnappers never picked up that those numbers were recorded and in order.
Penn Station that night, there were 450, half Nassau County, half FBI agents. They were surrounded all the streets around Penn Station because they didn't know where they would lead them. Plus, they were all obviously in plain clothes. They were all throughout Penn Station.
We started out in Times Square.
Yeah. And then went to Penn Station from there.
That's where we got the first phone call, was Times Square.
So when they went to Penn Station, they ended up with putting which is another whole long story, but the money ended up in a locker in Penn Station, and then they were able to grab the money and go down and get onto one train on track 17, get off the train and get onto another train, and they eluded the police. Well, the one question I asked them afterwards, first of all, believe it or not, with all those 450 police and FBI agents, they couldn't communicate because their radios did not work underground at the time. Today, the radios work underground. In those days, in 1974, they did not work on underground, and they must have known they didn't work underground. And that's where they were able to elude the police. That's the first thing. The second thing is They saw the guy. There are composites in the book of what he looked like. They saw him in Penn Station. They saw him go to the locker. They saw him get the money. They saw him go downstairs. They did everything. And I asked and then we'll go into some questions. I asked this deputy inspector, Dan Guido, who was the brightest guy in law enforcement I ever met, and he was in charge of the case. And I said, Dan, what happened? He said, Jack, we could have grabbed the guy. We saw him come out of we saw him take the money. We saw him go down. We could have grabbed him. But if we grabbed him, we wouldn't have gotten you. We wanted to follow him. And we lost him, and we couldn't follow him. But to grab him, we could have grabbed him. So, at any rate, that's a little short overview. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have, Janet, as well.
Have questions?
Meredith, did you want to ask the questions, or do you want me to read from the chat?
Can you see?
You talking to me?
No.
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 Oh, I got kicked off, so I don't have any of the chat questions anymore. So
Okay.
you can read them.
All right. So there was one question about how did this affect you and Janet for the rest of your life? How did this change you?
I didn't.
How did it change you and how did it affect your life with me?
It's not bad.
I can tell you, I never stopped telling him that I saved his life. His brother put the money in the wrong box and I had to figure out where he
Right.
put it.
Right.
And I couldn't even reach it
Right.
because it was above my head and it was too heavy. I had to go get him to come, get the money down. He was already calling the FBI. What do we do,
That's a very good question. You're not the same after. I look in my rearview mirror quite often. We never turn the alarm off in our house. It's on 24/7. And when we want to leave or come in, we only have one door that's we can activate or deactivate. So the answer is you live your life. You live. It doesn't leave you. You live your life, or I've lived my life somewhat differently. It took many years of therapy to be able to focus. That was the biggest thing. I couldn't focus. It took a couple of years to get back to be able to really focus. So the answer is you never really get back to where you were before, and you live your life differently. Actually, doing the book though was a big load off my shoulders. I think Janet as well.
I could tell you, being just 30, I didn't have so much confidence in myself. And the fact that I know I saved his life, made me more confident. And also, I grew up very fast.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I had to
Yeah.
choose between making the payoff or staying home with the boys and having Margot take my place. But I knew if he didn't come back, I wasn't going to be any good for my boys anyway.
There's another
Yes.
question.
Yeah.
I guess, how did you know where you were? I know in the car you were paying a lot of attention to the
You wasn't-
sounds and stuff, right?
Yeah.
How did you know figure out where you were?
That you thought you were in the Bronx.
No, I took mental notes. I know I went over a bridge. I know it was 2 coins that were dropped in tone machine. I know there were sounds of elevated subway train, when you hear the elevated subway. I knew I was in the Bronx. I knew I wasn't on Long Island. And it was either it was probably the Bronx. By the way, they never found the apartment. They never found the room. Not lack of trying. They tried, boy. They tried for weeks and
And
months.
they took you. to
I even
work.
I went with them many times. They were never able to find it. But it was just mental notes, church bells ringing, fire engine sirens. It was near a firehouse. I mean, it was all I gave them a lot of tools to work with, but they just couldn't come up with it. And by the way, had they found the place, there would have been a tremendous amount of evidence, fingerprints, and all sorts of stuff in the apartment. Talking about that in the trial, the car that this Mustang, which by the way belonged to his daughter, Williams's daughter, Celestine Williams, at the time. I described the car as much as I could describe it, and they found the car 2 years after the incident. It was in a junkyard somewhere, and they brought it back to police headquarters. By the way, Nassau County has a what do you call that? Like the FBI
Database?
No, where they have where they do research and all sorts of technical things. I forget a laboratory. Anyway, they searched the car, and believe it or not, they found one hair, from me, that was in the carpeting in that car.
Wow.
And I forgot it was a big deal at the trial because that was a piece of physical evidence.
Right.
And but they found one hair that was still in the car 2 years after the incident, out of a junkyard. So
All right, I'm reading from a chat. Did you ever hear from the Kings Point police again?
no, interesting when we did
Good
this, but
question.
when we did the book, Janet was not very complimentary to the Kings Point police. And if you ever read the book, you will see she was very uncomplimentary.
I don't blame
And I
them.
said to her, geez, do you really want to say all that, Janet? She says, I want to tell the truth. So we actually did. She actually did. I didn't change. I mean, we didn't change a word. She told them what she thought of it.
It's true.
And then
Yeah.
another thing says, interested in Ruby Williams. He was also a victim of an attempted kidnapping of his son. Was that attempted kidnapping ever solved?
Who?
I don't know.
This was Richard Williams or his brother, Rudy Williams.
No, that was his brother,
That was
Ruby
his
Williams.
brother. It's
Yeah,
very fascinating
by the
thing
way,
he turned him
Rudy
in.
Williams.
Yeah,
Ruby Williams turned his brother
brother
in.
in, right.
Yeah, Rudy Williams' brother, and Rudy Williams' son were shot execution style in White Plains, New York, the next town from me.
Wow.
Years later, number of years after, but it had nothing to do with my case. It was they were bad in their own right. They were in the numbers racket and gambling and all sorts of stuff. They weren't, and they were murdered. They were bad. By the way, he helped the police go after his brother. Actually, we now that you brought it up. We had a reward that we had posted early on. The police it's a long story, which I'm not going to go into. It takes too long, how they even got to this Rudy Williams. But they got to him, and he helped the police finger his brother and Charles Berkeley. So when I say helped, with a lot of pulling teeth, he helped. So he wanted the reward money. So I had, it's not in the book, handwritten letters from him to our lawyer at the time, looking for the reward money, which he didn't get. And I asked the police, and I said, did he help you with this? And they said, well, what he did was confirm what we really knew. He really didn't give us. He says, you don't have to turn over that money to him, because he wasn't that helpful. So we didn't give him the money. So.
Oops. Okay, so then I guess that people would like to know, hearing about your release and the first time, you and Janet reconnected, and the release, I guess, at the hotel and stuff.
At the Jade East.
Oh, the JDs, yeah. Well, that's another whole story. They let me out with this Williams, couple of blocks from the Jade East, in a dirty old dirt road at, I don't know, 9 o'clock, I guess, give or take. And I walked up the road, and there was a motel, the Jade East Motel. So I walked into the Jade East. I walked into the hotel. I looked like hell, dirty and
Same clothes for
yeah. I said, and they had pay phones in those days, if you remember. I said, where's the phone? Here's the phone. I went to the pay phone. I called.
They gave you the coins.
Yeah, there were coins. My jacket and my raincoat, and Janet picked up the phone. It rang about 10 times. I said, Janet, what happened? He didn't pick up the phone. Of course, they were trying to trace the police were trying to trace the number. So I told them where I was, and I walked out of the hotel. I walked out of the motel, walked into the parking lot, which was right in front of the door. I didn't get to the street, and there were maybe 20 cars that were converged all over the place. You couldn't believe it. They were coming off because a lot of them were stationed at Kennedy Airport, and between the police and the FBI. So a car with 3 FBI agents pull up to me. Are you Jack? Yes. I got into the car, and they took me right to FBI headquarters in Manhattan, which was 69th Street in Manhattan. And I was there for the rest of the evening till the following morning.
I went to the FBI headquarters to see him. I figured he'd probably be hungry, but so I brought him a bagel and lox and
Beer.
And a beer. I didn't know which he'd want. He had both. I figured he'd have to be hungry.
Like every nice Jewish wife would do, right?
Right. But I think that's not in the book either. You're getting inside information.
So I don't know if anyone else has questions. I think he answered pretty much everything that was in the chat. I know, Lou, you wanted to say something to Janet. If you want to unmute.
Unmute.
Oh,
No, it was me.
Oh.
Oh, right. Okay, Deb.
So just mostly because this is a Hadassah group, in no way do I mean to minimize, anything that you went through, Jack, but reading the book, I have to say, Janet, that I was so incredibly moved and touched and just awed by how your resolve and your strength and your courage. And I just wanted to say that, and, just to let you know, and I really was impressed with you and just felt like in this forum, especially, that it needed to be said. So
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I was not that mature at 30, but I grew up very fast.
Strong.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and it
Strong
gave me a lot of confidence in myself
Mhm.
because, I knew that I was responsible for him coming back.
Mhm.
But I also knew that if I didn't do anything, I couldn't live with myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and Debbie,
Janet was incredible.
who just talked, we're childhood friends, but she also went to Cornell when Mark was there. So
Oh, that's
Oh,
which
yeah.
one's Debbie?
Debbie,
Oh, that's
Hi.
Did she come to,
Oh,
he
okay.
came to
she's
graduation?
another West Hempstead
Yeah.
friend.
Eddie brought
And-
Mark to Lori's graduation
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
when he was
Yeah,
at Cornell.
I lost 10 pounds that week. Best diet. I
I'll
can't say it's
bet.
the best diet, but I mean, I never lost weight so fast
Mhm.
because I couldn't eat.
Mark is their oldest child. I'm just cluing them in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So does
he was 7 at the time.
yeah.
And
Right.
he wanted the men to leave the house. I told him that Margot, the FBI agent, and this Frank Spinelli they were married and they were looking for a house in the neighborhood, and that's why they were staying over. And, I was brought up not to lie. It was very hard for me to get the lies. And Mark, says, well, because I want them to leave. So we had to have Mark leave. He went and stayed with my with Buddy's wife
He went to Buddy.
and Buddy,
Yeah.
Well,
But you said Michael went to your parents, which I was shocked. I
Oh,
didn't.
yes.
I didn't
Well,
realize.
my parents never took care of
Never.
kids. And but I asked them to take when they did. And my mother calls me up and she says, Michael took off his shoes and lost them. And, I don't know what to do. I said, Mom, if I knew what to do, you wouldn't be watching him. Like if I could take care of him. I says, go buy him a new pair of shoes. So she did. So now,
Funny.
well, we know Margot as part of
The family.
so
yes,
she's amazing.
she feels
And-
very protective of us.
And just for our Hadassah friends who know me and my mom, for us, we lived through it in a different way because I was 9 years old. I was in 3rd grade, and I remember my parents saying, you are not allowed to, walk home alone. We'll be picking you up. Don't talk to anybody for the next week about, don't talk to anybody until, we find out what's happening with your cousin. And my grandfather, who was Orthodox, he actually, what was it? He went to the bank.
He had to go to they opened up the bank on a Friday night, and your father and my father had to go to the bank. And he
They were both
didn't
very
ride on
religious.
Shabbos, but this was a major thing, and he went. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah.
And
And we're so-
Marlene and Jack's brother Eddie and his father, and I don't remember who else was there, all came over to the house
Right.
like the second day after finding out what happened to Jack. And I felt I'm not having a shiva call.
Right.
And I made them leave
Right.
because I knew I had to be strong.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. You really were amazing.
So Hadassah, the power of women who do. Go, Janet.
She did it then. But anyhow, and this happened on a Tuesday, the day that when he came home from work, and we didn't know anything until Wednesday in our family. And on that Wednesday, I came home from a major Hadassah function that was at a synagogue in Lawrence, where Geraldo Rivera, Jim Jensen, and Tom Brokaw
Wow,
were all there for a myrtle wreath function.
wow.
Because they were honored. They came because it was right after the 6-Day War, and they were the people that had been to Israel during the 6-Day War. I came home from this humongous thing where there must have been 400 people there. And that's when I got the news. I said, oh, I mean, that was Wednesday, because we didn't know anything until Wednesday.
Oh.
But it was major. It was major.
So I'm so proud of Jack too, to be able to go through all this. And I know for 50 years, the family, we never
Talked about it.
We would
Never.
just see you at
Yeah.
family functions and be happy you were alive and well and thriving in our eyes, you know, but it's
Wow.
great that
Yeah.
therapeutically you were able to write this book, because I think it is part of our family's legacy, and for your grandchildren and children, that's important.
Yeah.
And but they
Well-
live life to the fullest. I really think that you do everything that you can. You belong to so many, all these groups. They did travel tremendously. They wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be in Florida now if you could be traveling, because they're never home. Anytime I call on the cell, I don't know where they
Yeah.
are, but whatever. And they're very, very giving and wonderful to family. They had something every year in Florida when it was his birthday, which was last month. Well, this month.
Yeah.
He would have a party for everybody. There would come. He didn't say it was his birthday, but everybody would come. They used to come to visit Florida. Now they have a home there, but they used to come to visit. And
My
when
parents were in
they said
Florida.
that all they would do was go visiting all the different relatives that they saw. They're going to see them instead. They'll have a party and they'll have them all at one time. And every year we had a party at Morton's. They closed the whole place in Palm Beach. It was like unbelievable. And you
We
really,
had a different theme every year.
and oh my God, you know that I still have the towel. Do you remember? Well, another thing, I just have to clue you in. My cousin Jack, when he's home, he is every weekend, he takes a trip to Costco, because it's right down the road from where he lives, right up the street, and
I
you
do the
always
shop- I
find
do all
something
the
to buy.
shopping,
And we used to
believe
do
it
a
or not.
theme for the party. And one year it was something with Hawaii, I think, because remember the big beach towels, those big
Yes.
that we use for tablecloths? We still
Yes.
They're huge towels. They sold them at Costco, and they had them for tablecloths. I just want to tell you, I just deleted your MasterCard charge card that was in my notes from on my phone from your thing, because he would say, "Go get that, charge that, get that." And so they really do. I really think it's a major thing, that the way you would never think that anything had ever happened. I mean, they just live life to the fullest, and they have wonderful grandchildren, and Jamie wasn't even thought up at the time.
No, all right, I'll mention about that.
She was an afterthought.
No, she wasn't, well, it wasn't that. She was a
No.
present. Jack
Lori?
wanted a third child,
Yes,
and I came from a family of 2. He came from a family of 3 children.
absolutely.
And after the trial, I said, okay, I'm gonna make you a father again.
That's right.
Another great gift.
Now she has 3 boys.
Debbie Ring, you had a question?
Yeah, I had 2 questions.
Yes.
Jack, I didn't get a chance to read the book yet, but did you say yet what you were thinking when you were being held? Did you have any idea? Did you figure out at all who might be holding you, or that you didn't know the whole time?
No, not only did I not know who was holding, no, I absolutely knew nothing about that. But I knew nothing about the negotiations with the family or
Right.
I knew I knew zero
Okay.
about it.
And the name of the book, is that what the police called it, or is that, I'm not
The-
sure how you came up with it.
Yeah, it's a good question. The FBI gave the name of the case. The FBI case was Jacknap.
Okay,
That's the case name. So when I thought about doing the book, I thought it would be an appropriate name to give the
Right,
to
right.
give the book. But just so Jacknap is that was the case name. And by the way, they when they were real frustrated in the first number of months of the case, they asked me to would I mind being hypnotized. I said yes, I would. And they said anyway, they didn't let up on me, including my brother at the time. And I ended up at a Dr. Herbert. If you look him up Herbert Spiegel, foremost MD psychiatrist. He just died recently, but he was the guru of hypnotism. So anyway, long story short, they did not get very much information, even being hypnotized. So whatever I was able to remember was mostly what they got. It didn't. The hypnotism part didn't help them get any additional information.
Were you shocked when you found out it was that coworker, the person who worked for you, when you found out, or?
Yes. Not only was not only did he work for me, but he was the shop steward. Our engineering department was unionized. He was the shop steward. He was. I knew. I mean, he was a coworker. I knew him. I sat with him. I talked to him. I didn't know his family, but I knew him quite well. And of course, I was flabbergasted that he was involved.
Jack,
Thank
wasn't
you.
that how they came up with the amount of money? That it was something with the pension plan or something? Was that the story?
Well, the answer that's another good question. The fellow that worked for me,
Right.
he was there 15 years, at least 15, could have been a little longer. He was in our company pension plan and our company profit sharing plan. And when he left the company, he got his profit sharing money, and whatever he was accumulated in his 15 years of work, and he had a vested interest in our pension plan. So he knew enough information. I mean, he could piece together, well, they had X number of people, because it was all the office people and and not the factory people. The union office people and the non-union office people were all part of the plan, these two plans. So he probably put together in his head, well, I earned this amount of money, and they have another, 80 people, I don't know, whatever it was, and he added it up in his head, and that was one of the things that they were questioned me on, and in fact, that's where they got most of the money so quickly, was actually from the pension plan. You couldn't do it today. You'd probably go to jail. They borrowed the money from the company pension plan because it was readily available, and they paid it back over a number of years. And what do you call it? And that's actually where they got the money, the bulk of the money from. And by the way, the government disallowed it as a deduction. That was another whole fight, and it actually went up to the to what they call conference in Washington, and even though they disallowed it as they ended up allowing it as a deduction. After 3, 4, 5 years, it was a legal fight.
Was that with the IRS or that was the government?
IRS.
Okay.
The IRS in Washington. Yep.
Ask the accountant.
Look, he
Yes,
was,
the accountant.
he worked for the company, you know.
He's surrounded by accountants.
Yeah. Well, I'm not an accountant. I just worked for one.
No, I know.
Oh,
I'm not a doctor. I just know everything.
yeah.
Well, thank
I
you
have to
so
tell-
much for,
Okay,
Can I just add one thing? I want to tell
Yes.
Jack and Janet that I have never read a book so fast in my life. It took me literally one day to finish your book. I found it absolutely
Riveting.
mesmerizing and terrifying, and I was feeling your feelings while I was reading it, and the courage that you have to retell your story. It's just I give you a lot of credit. Got to be a hard thing to relive.
So now a heads
Thank-
up,
thank you.
there's a couple of, 5 different people have approached him about making a movie.
Oh, really?
But because of Black Lives Matters right now, too sensitive a topic, but it will be in the future.
Oh, I would love to see that.
Yeah, the world has to calm down.
One of them is was a British company, want to do a Netflix of 10, series of 10 episodes,
Oh, that would be great.
but the others were all movies.
I'm in.
Wow.
So,
We'll see. We'll
Good for
see.
Hadassah, good for Hadassah movie get together.
Yeah.
so thank you so
Right.
much from our Ahava
Thank
Makar
you.
chapter and Nassau
Thank you.
region.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll get to see
Okay.
you sometime soon in person when
Yes.
everyone's
when the world-
vaccinated and COVID goes away.
We don't even see our grandchildren. Actually, I'm going back to New York next week, and Janet was going to go with me. It's our daughter's birthday, and we're going to do a Zoom birthday party with the kids. Even in New York, we got our two shots.
but the kids haven't.
But the
had
kids-
theirs.
No, the kids didn't have anything.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's still, you know,
Yeah.
And it turned out, I can't go up. I have.
yeah. As it turns out, you can't go anyway. But
Yeah, Jamie's
gonna-
birthday, we're the same week. I'm the second.
She's the first.
oh yeah.
Right,
She's the first.
yeah.
And Ashley is the
Yeah.
26th of this month.
Well, thank you for everyone who came on
Okay.
also because it was a
Yeah.
fundraiser and it's been very hard to fundraise this year. So we appreciate everyone's support. And see you all soon in person, we hope. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Jack and
All
Janet.
right. Nice to see
Appreciate it.
everyone. Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks. And
Okay,
thanks,
thank
Sherry.
you.
Okay.
Thank you. Great, great book.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Why do you want to do?
Yeah.